Okay, so at the CoLab, we have long thought about artificial intelligence as one of our core technologies, and on the rise, sort of along with that, has been this idea of bots, and we started exploring it as a group and with our members earlier in the year, and this was a talk that we put together to kind of help define that and talk about some of the things that we think are relevant to explore here in this case.
What were you, before?
I was an actuarial program. Worked for a big insurance company. It really gives you a great feeling helping folks plan for their future needs. And of course, if you think of the payments as an annuity over the years, the cost is really quite minimal.
Yeah, that's great. Actuarial program, nice.
All right, it's my favorite and maybe one of the earliest references to a bot that I could find. The thing about Tron and the whole plot there is the idea of software having its own kind of wants and desires and having agency and acting on behalf of people and interacting in ways that we were trying to imagine what that would be like as humans, and I feel like some of it's coming true. So hopefully that'll carry through in the next few minutes here. But bots, as we know them, have existed on the internet for quite a while, and they've made things possible that we kind of take for granted and maybe weren't even thinking of as the bots that we think of today. So there have been good bots like crawlers, web crawlers, like the thing that makes Google possible. There have been bots that do transactions on our behalf. Some of that can go awry, like in terms of algorithmic trading and stuff like that. It can kind of go off the deep end if we don't keep that in check. But there's bots that can provide us information. There's art bots, game bots, bots that play poker for us. One IDEO actually kind of kept himself solvent doing that for quite some time. And then there's bad bots. There's hackers, there's spam bots, there's bots that scrape the web and put information that we don't want out there, bots that impersonate you, me, real humans. And just this stuff has accounted for half the traffic on the internet. But bots as we know them today has come to mean something a little bit different. And this is a phenomenon that we're looking at a bit more specifically here. And when we talk about a bot, there's kind of a spectrum that it exists on. At one extreme, it's a very simple conversational interface that's using natural language processing to understand commands and kind of do stuff. So like that's Siri, for example. It's not super smart, it has a limited vocabulary, but it's getting better. And with Echo, Alexa, Google Home, etc., the race is kind of on to do NLP and to understand user intent in new and more sophisticated ways, which gets us to this idea of a software agent, which is something that's representing a digital service and has some opinion about what it wants to do, and is also trying to resolve that with what the user wants to do and match that up. And over time, things like machine learning and the relationship building that can create with users starts to become relevant. So that's where you start to get into more, I guess you'd say, real AI or something like that, where the machine is making inferences, it's learning over time, it's doing all these things that we kind of expect of AI, and hopefully that will pan out better for us humans. But this is already kind of like a cloudy and vague thing. And, we're sort of stuck with bots as a name as far as I can tell. I think part of it is our human tendency to anthropomorphize things, which is, I think, a good thing. We try to relate to the stuff that we can't see or feel or experience in a very direct way. And, while people have made attempts to change the name to intelligent agent or software agent or something like that, bots have just kind of stuck. And so that, that's cool. And I think maybe it's actually might be helpful for us as we start to think about what bots can be. So why have bots kind of risen to the surface right now? There's a lot of phenomena. Some of it is based on technology. Some of it is based on past technology, I guess you'd say. this thing called the internet happened, and all these digital services started to become available. And at some point it was about just like getting people traffic to your website, and then that kind of stagnated. And then all of a sudden there were mobile devices, and the mobile web became really important, and apps became really important. But that market has gotten super stagnant right now as well. And so getting a user to look at your new service or to go try it in any of those prior formats is really challenging. We're kind of inundated to the point as humans that we kind of like can't take in any new information. We're having trouble learning new UI faster, and more platforms start appearing. So like there's a lot of kind of just human fatigue that's happening there. At the same time though, we're spending more time than ever on communicating with each other on social platforms, whether that's chat, text messaging, what have you. And the idea of what a conversational interface can do, or a bot can do, is bring the service to where people are already interacting with each other and already spending time. And that's kind of interesting because there's this kind of built-in distribution platform that a bot can just jump onto, like Facebook Messenger. Meanwhile, in the background, AI is improving. We're taking things like natural language processing for granted, and there's this kind of disappearing, the disappearing AI phenomenon that Reid talks about sometime. What this leads to, I think, coming full circle to apps, is the potential to take these digital services from obscurity or things that or take information even that's hidden and bring it to the surface and create better engagement for users. So as a lab, we're looking at the way AI was going to change software agents and how they interact on our behalf. Right now, that's kind of taking the shape of three themes: interfaces, coordination, and agency. So let's talk about interfaces. This is that last point that I made. Like there's all these digital services, and bots can create engagement with them in new contexts. And the way that we as humans interact with bots is probably going to change. So like that right now, that can be when we're walking down the street, if we're on a spaceship, if we're doing something with our hands, like even acting as a surgeon in an operating room. There's a lot of stuff that a bot can make possible that we would have otherwise needed our hands or some other type of user interface that would have taken our focus off of what we were doing. And here we're kind of just adding a new channel, but also the bot can kind of start to surface functions that we might not even know about, that we would have had to look for visually or find out about in another manner. So an example of this is a prototype that we built back in January called vFarm, which was looking at resources and helping to balance resources across the system. And so you start thinking about a shared database, certainly, but what they looked at in the case of medication administration was the fact that you needed a good interface to that database no matter where you were. And so they started to look at a bot, Google Home, as a way to do that. And there's a secondary advantage of it being hands-free. So suddenly you don't need a computer screen or a keyboard. You don't need a laptop, what have you, to update the levels of medication in a database. You just have to say, hey Google, or hey bot, I just used 200 milligrams of ibuprofen, and it can update the database for you. And they also built a platform that would measure whether you picked up the right pill bottle or not, which is kind of an interesting other problem with conversational interfaces, which is that the system has to trust what the user is telling it. Separate problem. But you could start to think about hands-free applications showing up in other places like manufacturing, or running through safety checklists in a nuclear power plant or a place like that. Okay, next phenomenon.
I suppose you're programmed for etiquette and protocol.
Protocol? Why, it's my primary function, sir. I am well versed in all the customs.
I have no need for a protocol droid.
Of course you haven't, sir. Not in an environment such as this. That is why I have been programmed.
What I really need is a droid who understands the binary language of moisture evaporators.
Evaporators? Sir, my first job was programming binary load lifters, very similar to your evaporators in most respects.
Can you speak Bocce?
Of course I can, sir. It's like a second language to me. I'm a
Yeah, all right, shut up. I'll take...
this is the second phenomenon that I think is going to start happening with bots more and more, which is just like figuring out what the heck the bot can do. And Uncle Owen's having this dialogue with C-3PO, asking him this barrage of questions and trying to understand what is the fit between me and what this service provider, this digital service provider can do. So he's asking, you know, I need this, I need that. And getting a response from that. And one of the things that you'll see across bots now is they don't behave consistently. There's no easy, simple way for me to interact with, say, the Domino's Pizza bot on Facebook Messenger and understand exactly what I can do or what the right protocol is for interacting with that. So one of the phenomena I think we can explore is new ways of figuring out what to expect of bots. Another is standards, or even within a company, if a company has multiple bots, consistent behavior across the different bots. And third is the sharing of data across bots, because if I'm interacting with another bot, even within a company, like let's say I call up my bank and I'm talking to my savings account bot, but then they send me over to talk to my mortgage bot for some other reason, I want to understand how much that bot knows about the conversation I've already had because I'm talking within the same company. So sharing data across channels, across business units, or even like third parties, like does my Yelp bot know what my interaction with my Domino's Pizza bot was? And does that lead to some beneficial outcome for me as a user? Starts to become interesting. That leads us into research theme number 2, which is about bots connecting to other bots in order to extend their own abilities or coordinate things. So this is something probably you guys might recognize from Star Wars. This is R2-D2's kind of like magic wand that he's, you know, even when he's on an Empire ship, he can suddenly connect to their computer system and open garage doors, you know, lower force fields, do all these different things. And somehow that just kind of like magically works. I've always been baffled by that. Like, how is it that this droid has the same knowledge of the Empire's protocol, and why the heck isn't that encrypted and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the point is, bots don't really have a way right now to interact with other bots that's consistent. And so this leads to a few different things. Like one is like bots interacting with one another according to a protocol that's predetermined. But it also has to do with, you know, just how they talk to one another when we're not around. And there've been some interesting articles that have come up recently about, you know, we set up these two bots to talk to one another and they invented a language that we can't understand as humans. That's super interesting. And, you know, do bots in the business space talk the same way as bots in a you know, consumer space? Does the pizza bot talk, is it less formal or more formal with other bots than, you know, a financial trading bot or something like that? And this starts to build into bots connecting with one another, not just to like share information about us, but to develop their behavior, their abilities a lot more. So this is the Master Control program from Tron. And as I know you'll all remember, the plot of the movie was that Master Control was basically capturing other programs in order to kind of extend its ability and become more and more powerful. And the programs had a chance to like basically like fight each other, and if they lost, they'd get destroyed, or I think they got assimilated into Master Control at some point. So, you know, this capacity to grow is something that bots may or may not do. I don't think they'll assimilate other bots into themselves and grow bigger and bigger like some giant blob character. But the ability to interface in order to extend abilities in order to make them more useful to us as humans is something that should come about. And you can see this start to happen. You can ask an Echo to learn a new skill, and you can say, you know, let me talk to so-and-so, let me talk to the Domino's Pizza bot, and they'll kind of, you know, metaphorically speaking, put them on the phone and you're interacting with another bot. And, you know, eventually you may just go through your own bot to do this. One of the things that kind of is happening in the background is, what's the protocol? I mean, there's no API standard that helps bots talk to one another efficiently, or at least it's not consistent as it's implemented now. One speculation that you could make here is that actually bots might use natural language to talk to one another, which seems super inefficient, like computers talking to other computers in English or whatever human language. But it's kind of a lowest common denominator that they might start out with and then move into some sort of robot language in the future. So this is probably going to look less like master control and more like some kind of friendly board character or something like that. There's got to be a sci-fi metaphor here where there's this collective knowledge and collective ability that certain bots come to be the point person for in terms of interacting with us. And then they kind of go out and take care of a whole bunch of stuff on our behalf. One prototype that looked at this was DisasterBot, and this was started with the idea of digital twins, which are digital representations of typically mechanisms or machinery in the physical world. In this case, the team was looking at making a digital twin of a hospital and having that monitor information and then go coordinate a whole bunch of services in order to respond to a disaster. So if there was a natural disaster that was pending from the weather service alert, it could look at hospital staffing and understand whether there were gaps in the calendar if they needed to ramp up staffing in anticipation of patients coming into the hospital. And then if there were holes in the schedule, send text messages to staff that weren't at the hospital saying, can you fill this particular shift? And the staff member could respond, and the bot then kind of filled in the schedule in order to make sure that there was enough staffing for the hospital. So it was coordinating text messaging services, calendaring services, load prediction for the hospital, as well as monitoring weather alerts for disasters. So it looks like a whole bunch of stuff is coming together. Humans spend a lot of time on this. Currently, a bot can kind of become the person that's coordinating or the agent that's coordinating all that stuff. So agency, interesting theme. That's our third research theme. Here, this is like, if I am a human, I want a bot who's going to act on my behalf. Currently, I go out and I interact with a whole bunch of different services. They act differently. It's a lot of work for me. It's just like having to pick up the phone or go to a whole bunch of different websites to do things. I want Mr. Carson to take care of my household for me and to be my agent. Hopefully you guys all know Downton Abbey. Here, he's kind of the head of the household, and there's this whole staff of people that are working to do things like clean the mansion, cook the meals, go out and get things, deliveries, etc. But Mr. Carson is that point person, and he has so much authority within the house, and he's trusted by the heads of the household to do that. And that relationship was built up over time. So we're super interested in this, especially looking at how an agent coordinates bots and non-bots, or humans and non-humans in some kind of network that might not even be something that I look at as a user or as a human. So there's two things that really become important here. One is the idea of building a relationship over time so that the bot knows my preferences and my expectations. Understanding my intent when I ask it a simple question, and a lot of that's coming from context. And then going out and coordinating a whole bunch of services on my behalf to the point that I don't even know whether it's coordinating a human or a bot to do that service. A prototype that was an example of this was the Let's Move bot. Here, this was taking the tedious task of moving and me just putting in some simple parameters of like, I'm moving on this date. I need to go from here to here. And it starts to coordinate a whole bunch of services without my even asking it to. In fact, proactively suggesting services like, oh, you're gonna need moving insurance, and even taking care of ordering a pizza when I get to there. So this started to explore that. I think there's a lot more here. So 3 themes: interfaces leading to greater engagement, coordination, extending bot abilities, and then finally, maybe culminating in agency, bots representing me and coordinating stuff on my behalf, perhaps without me even asking. And a quick caveat on this, just because it's super over-indexed on voice, this is really not just conversational. There's a whole bunch of input that can help determine user intent, that can help understand context. And as you all are exploring things around triangulating different data sources or integrating different data sources to kind of verify one data stream, or to maybe disambiguate another data stream, this becomes relevant. So, right now we're looking at these hockey pucks and other shaped things with speakers in them that sit on our countertop and we talk to, but there's going to be a lot more contextual information that's coming in the future, hopefully, so that we get a little bit closer to Mr. Carson.